But you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. And the Zionist is about whether or not Israel is a safe haven for Jews because of their history of how they've been persecuted.
Are you a Zionist?
Yes. Now you'll be able to make a lot out of that because people don't know what a Zionist is. Do you know what a Zionist is?
I just ask questions, I don't answer.
By the way, I'm the guy that did more for the Palestinian community than anybody. I'm the guy that opened up all the assets. I'm the guy that made sure that I got the Egyptians to open the border to let good goods through, medicine and food but what's happening is, and I'm the guy that's been able to pull together the Arab states to agree to help the Palestinians with food and shelter. I'm the guy, and so it's not, I mean, I've been,
Yeah. All right. We were going to do a show about the Middle East actually tonight, and that show is going to happen very soon. But I have to say, this is not going to be a very materialist way for me to put it, but it feels like the universe is conspiring to get me to do an episode about the presidential election. We had over the course of, if we're going to go back like a couple of weeks, we had this like shocking, jaw-dropping debate performance that led to a weeks-long national crisis over the fact that the guy with the nuclear codes is, according to loose lift staffers talking to Axios, generally pretty good until about 4 p.m. Then on Saturday, we had a assassination attempt. The most serious attempt to kill a current or former president since, I guess, the guy who shot at Reagan in 1981. And it, I mean, certainly when the picture came out at the end of it of Trump having, Secret Service agents huddle around him as they're holding him up under the flag while he pumps his fist as there's blood going down his face. I know I had a horrible sinking feeling in my gut that I think a lot of people did, that might just be a wrap as far as this whole election business. And then today, the RNC is starting. Apparently, some reports of said that Trump wanted to wait until the convention was actually going to do an apprentice-style reveal of his running mate, but he decorum one out, and he announced it a few hours earlier. It is Ohio Senator JD Vance, so that's one for the base, and also I think evidence that Trump is not very worried about the election. And so with all of this going on, it seemed like, okay, fuck it. We'll just do an episode about election news. We've got assassination attempts. We've got Project 2025. We've got presidential senility. We've got JD Vance. I don't, maybe if you can arrange all these in your head to the tune of "We Didn't Start the Fire," can pretend that we use that as a cold open. But we do have many things to cover tonight, and to join us to cover them, we have Deep State Kuba, because my God, if there was ever a time to check in with somebody who understood how the deep state worked, it would be now, because there's some interesting questions about what's going to be happening with the deep state come January. But Kuba, how are you doing?
I mean, there's nothing that concentrates the mind more than the prospect of a hanging, and there is a certain apocalyptic frisson that comes with this kind of news. That said, apocalyptic is not my favorite flavor of frisson, and we're unfortunately going to have to live with the consequences of this season of like the new Amazon Prime. Basically, we're in we're in a season of The Boys at this point, except with less glamour and sadder orgies.
That sounds about right. You remember Madison Cawthorn talking about being invited to orgies in Washington D.C. He like
he
the
demurred, and apparently,
I mean, the funniest part of that to me was when he said he was all shocked because he got there and he saw people doing key bumps of coke. Now, I lived in Miami for 6.5 years as a young man, so I knew what he was talking about. But, just to put this gently, I'm not sure a lot of people who have no previous experience with the phenomena, have that phrase in their vocabularies. So,
yeah, Webster's or whatever dictionary that is that does a lot of the tweets about like word definitions. Actually had to tweet out like the definition of key bump, which was kind of beautiful.
Yeah, you should. I'm amazed nobody was doing like YouTube explainer videos where they, took out the.
This is just flour for anybody watching at home.
I'm gonna do some really good acting, so I demonstrate it.
I actually have a spoon attached to my keychain, so my key bumps are epic.
Wow,
that is I think a different category. That's not a it's a different kind of thing at that point. But in any case, somebody who might or might not have a history of cocaine abuse, JD Vance is of the next apparent vice president and thus possibly president, because lest we forget, I know he comes off as significantly younger, but if Donald Trump wins in November, in January, he will be the oldest person to have ever assumed the presidency, beating the previous record set by Joe Biden in January 2021.
My understanding, too, is that the term limits apply even for non-consecutive presidencies. So no matter what, the vice presidential spot is a consequential one.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. Okay. No, for sure. It's a consequential one. So, we will get deeply into Vance in a moment, or at least as deep as those waters go. I actually did a fair amount of reading about Vance a couple of years ago because I wrote an article about him for the Daily Beast called "The Unbelievably Phony Populism of JD Vance." Yep, that's the one. But there you go.
Incidentally, that's another tell of phony populism. Right?
I think that these guys they're doing key bumps of Ozempic these days instead of cocaine. I mean, Trump is if Trump he slimmed down a little bit. He had a quick movement right before. Maybe he wouldn't have been capable of it. So his physical fitness.
He would have been a larger target.
Yeah, true. Maybe it would have hit him in the jowl or something. So good, good for him. But the Ozempic cheekbones.
All right. Jake's already broke the seal. If you want to do the joke, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the real problem is that Trump's always just been too far to the right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
you're a dad without telling me you're a dad.
Are we treating this topic with reverence? Apologies if I was we can get to it later, but I was thinking I was pretty affected by it, but if you'd definitely growing up, if you had told me there was an inches away assassination attempt on a former president, the degree to which I just was able to go on with my day after that was pretty surprising.
I will say I told the story on the stream with Stefan the other day, but I will say in my case, it felt like a very generally weird day because I got up in the morning. I went out to take my dog on a walk, and I couldn't go the route that I normally do because there were essentially a bunch of soldiers standing on the dirt road by me. It's the Guardian National, I believe, which is sort of used for certain domestic policing purposes. I'm not totally clear on how all this works. I kind of try not to be, but yeah, basically there are a bunch of guys who were dressed like 100 of them were going to fight Jason Bourne, who were standing around the dirt road, holding the big rifles and all of that. And, so it was kind of a while. I was like talking to my neighbors and stuff. Nobody had any idea what was going on, but, Jason Miles was out of town this weekend, so they weren't fighting him. But in any case,
maybe they're just trying to keep him out.
Yeah, just in case he comes back. But then I got home, and I was, by the time I kind of buckled down to like, okay, I really need to get some work done, that happened, and I have to admit, it did feel very apocalyptic to me, and I was doom scrolling for quite a while, but yeah, I mean, if you told your earlier self that there was going to be a inches away, assassination attempt on a former president who was also the leading candidate this time, and also it was Donald Trump, I think that would be a lot to process, but yeah, I mean, I think that we should start on the assassination attempt and kind of get out of the way my most like appallingly shit-lib take, so everybody can be horrified by it. Which is that I think political violence is really bad. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think violence in general should require a high threshold of justification, because it's really bad to take human life, and I also think that going down a road of political violence in a country like the United States in 2024 is incredibly dangerous and would end very, very, very badly for my side. Because I will just note, if you think about the different factions of American politics, the far left has a lot of graduate students and not a lot of, say, Marine Corps veterans in it. So, do the math on that. And our friend and, frequent guest, Branko Marcetic, wrote a article for Jacobin where he said a lot of those things. It's called The Last Thing This Country Needed. The deck is yesterday's assassination attempt on Donald Trump points to profound sickness in American political life, whose threats don't discriminate by party or ideology. And he said a lot of things here about how, of course, we didn't know. We kind of still don't know why the guy who did it. Twitter detectives, pretty much as soon as the person was identified, started ransacking what they could to find evidence of the person's ideology. And what do we have? He was, it looks like some of these may just be the right name and zip code, wrong person. But it looks like he was registered as a Republican. It looks like he donated to some sort of progressive PAC when he was 17. He was all of 20 when he committed suicide by cop, tried to assassinate Trump. Also, that was kind of scammy. Like, he might not have known what he was donating to. It's a little unclear. Also, he didn't have much of a social media presence, or leave a manifesto or anything. Also, I would point out, over the course of the last, I don't know, this is America, so what has it been in the last 3 years? 5 million high-profile shootings that have happened in that time. One thing that does jump out at me as a pattern is that most people who do stuff like this are not actually doing it under the influence of some well thought out, internally coherent ideology. Like usually even people who do leave manifestos, it's kind of weird and incoherent. And, you can find breadcrumbs leading in a few different directions. And we have no idea, right? I mean, like, look, the guy who shot, Reagan in 81, I think did it because he thought that it would he'd be able to go out with Jodie Foster because she'd be impressed that he'd done it.
She later said that she was kind of impressed. I think she said that like 3 years ago. I think that there were other reasons that they couldn't have dated.
Sure.
But no, she really did. She was like, honestly, I was kind of. I'm curious. I see why she waited a long time to say.
I wouldn't have. I think that was a good move not to say that in the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like this is we don't know. It also doesn't matter very much because people are going to interpret it how they're going to interpret it, regardless of what was going on in that guy's head. But Bronco made some pretty obvious points about how things like this tend to, like, if it was successful, it would not, in fact, have been successful in any way that would be good. Like if it had actually killed him, that would probably lead to some pretty bleak consequences in terms of state repression. That things like this tend to lead to a lot of cycles of, violence and counter-violence. And he also had some boiling hot takes like killing people is morally wrong. And so there was quite a bit of backlash to this on Twitter. So yeah, this was he had when he said killing people is wrong, whether it's, and then he lists a long sort of disjunction of reasons that people were killed, and one of them is they're wearing a hoodie and it scares you, and so people with A+ reading comprehension took that as comparing Trump to Trayvon Martin, which is obviously not what he was saying. But we also have stuff like, okay, that's Tyler kind of riffing off the larger thing. But if we'll go back to that one. But if we keep going, yeah. Whenever Jacobin publishes the stupid shit imaginable, and then it's his name. Keep going. This is a very common theme of people who got mad at this article. You're literally called Jacobin. And then next one, along similar lines, this guy, Ajay Singh Chaudhary, that's the head of the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research, says, I guess the Toussaint Louverture logo and the name Jacobin really are purely just marketing. Next one is this is an economics professor, I believe, who I don't know a lot about him, but his Twitter bio refers to him as a liberal socialist and anti-war Keynesian. Says, dude, your magazine is called Jacobin, and you posted this on Bastille Day, which is kind of fun. It's like a little bit like the sort of, I don't know. There's a whole thing about like people who like get mad because they think that what somebody has said is offensive in terms of like LGBT issues. They say, and during Pride Month, right? So it's like a little, and on Bastille Day, right? You say this on Bastille Day, my God.
It's nothing sacred.
Yeah, exactly.
If we can't celebrate an assassination attempt against someone we don't like on Bastille Day, then right. I don't want to be right.
Exactly. Yes, I like Tyler Austin Harper, friend of the show, says the people with cartoon profiles melting down because Jacobin ran an article opposed political assassinations, but you're called Jacobin is like getting mad at those dumb liquid death, sparkling waters containing no death, and they literally just called it that because it sounds cool. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to start getting mad at articles that I don't like. They're published in the Atlantic by pointing out the real Atlantic Ocean never would have said that. But I don't, it seems to me that you can, in fact, hold all of the thoughts in your head without inconsistency. That I think the name of the magazine is actually taken from the C.L.R. James book, The Black Jacobins. That's where the artwork comes from, certainly. But look, you can think. it's justifiable for a pro-democracy crowd to storm a prison in the dying days of France's ancien regime. You can think, Haitians were certainly justified in rising up against slavery. You can also think that, generally speaking, violence is bad and takes a lot to justify, and political violence is generally dangerous and counterproductive. And certainly when you use phrases like political violence in 2024 in the United States, perhaps readers with two brain cells to rub together for warmth could be counted on to follow the context clues and think that perhaps when somebody says political violence is really bad, they're thinking about historical circumstances similar to the ones we actually live in, not like, what if we were all transported back to France or Haiti in the 1780s? Then what would you say about political violence?
Once it's one of those situations where you can't unring the bell. And if you are in a situation when the cycles of political violence have begun, the social order is broken down, social peace is through, the old institutions of order are no longer functional, and you have a generalized resort to violence. Well, of course, there's going to be one side that you may prefer. There may be one side which is objectively, clearly more humane, more better, more hopeful, more rational. But any path that leads over mountains of dead, no matter the destination, is one which should give us pause.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's bad to create mountains of dead.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
exactly. The mountains of dead might be the problem here, right? Because even in the cases where you have the clearest and most obvious favorite, right? Like the Haitian Revolution being an excellent example. Most of those bodies were Black Haitians.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it just seems like, and in general, right? I mean, look, I think the, at the risk of being a ridiculous squishy lib, that's actually one of the reasons that I think that, anti-interventionism is a good default position, that, in any war, the overwhelming majority of people who die in it are going to be working class people who are just trying to live their lives. And, again, if democracy breaks down, right, the ballot box is no longer available, etc. Again, nobody's arguing for absolutism here. I know some people thought Bronco was, but that's because they can't read. Yes, it was worthwhile to fight to defeat the Confederacy. Yes, if Salvador Allende had been able to, to crush the coup against him in 1973 by military force, that would have been justifiable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
I'll even say that fighting the Nazis might have been a good idea.
Yeah. I actually, I went on for a little while about that hot take a few post games ago. That, just came right out the box with a fight, with like, a divisive, the Nazis were bad take. But yeah, right. Like, sure. All true. Right. But, that's, that's compatible with saying, like, Karl Marx in 1872 is, his Hague address to the First International, said, okay, on continental Europe that's ruled by monarchs and despots, the working class has no choice but to use force. But in advanced democracies like England and the United States, it might be possible to, Socialist Party to take power, peacefully. And I think he held open the possibility, certainly, that the capitalists would respond to that the way that the way that Southern slave owners responded to the election of Abraham Lincoln. But I think that the man knew what he was talking about in sort of seeing not going down that road, right, as the first resort. And certainly when you talk about stuff like assassinating individuals, I mean, God, you have to, you can be so much less squishy than I've been in for the last few minutes and see that like that's just crazily counterproductive behavior. That, Lenin and Trotsky were all over this. If you read the stuff that they wrote about assassination as a tactic and why it was dumb. And this is
famously squishy Lenin and Trotsky.
yeah. Couldn't, fainted at the sight of blood, right? Yeah, exactly. So while we were on this, though, I do just want to call out, just because it's so relevant to, we did a whole episode a couple of weeks ago about my debate with him, and by far, like a lot of these guys that we've been quoting are doing what people often do on Twitter, which is focusing on finding out ways in which their enemies are hypocritical or inconsistent, which is a good cheat code for not having to work out what you actually think and defend it. Right? Like, okay, so do you think that assassinations are good? I guess, to be fair, you can't apply this critique here, but we got a bold pro-assassination take from internet personality Stephen Bennell, better known as Destiny, or at the very least a bold anybody who got shot has it coming take. So he writes in one tweet, Donald Trump incited an insurrection and then was granted full criminal immunity for all his involvement. I have zero sympathy for anything that happens to him or anyone who supports him, which is not irrelevant because there was a retired firefighter in the crowd who was killed over the course of it. Next tweet. A person in a crowd cheering for and supporting a traitor to this country caught astray. I'm so sad. Please. Next tweet. Okay, so this is actually a quote tweet. So there's a tweet from Corey Comparatore, who's the guy who got killed, where he says something doubtless extremely stupid, right? It looks like, I don't have the whole context, but it looks like he said something pro-Putin, which is bad. I agree.
Or maybe he was riffing on the whole everything that Trump does is secretly Putin's bidding.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would be my guess.
It's sure entirely possible, but in any case, Destiny quote tweets it and says, "This is the fucking retard that got killed at the Trump rally. Fucking LMAO."
Incidentally, that's ableist language is not cool.
It's my main objection to this. Yeah.
I was fine with everything up until that point.
Whoa, not cool.
We were all fine with everything up until that point. He lost me at the R word.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It strikes me that like I'm not gonna interrogate anybody about their various family members, but I would be shocked if this screen doesn't have like at least, I don't know, let's call it 3 or 4 relatives you can think of who voted for Trump. Right?
Joke's on you. None of us are citizens.
Yeah. Kuba is exempted from this because none of them are citizens.
I
still voted for Trump.
What's that?
I voted for Kaczynski in Poland.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. But yes, the other 3 people on the screen, probably, certainly in my case, I can think of 1 or 2, right? Like, that's, and I don't know. I mean, I've got to say, right? I think that like, I don't know, my uncle, for example, who voted for Trump, I don't actually think he should die. Like, I think if somebody
one of your squishy middle of the road lib centrist cuck takes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if somebody shot him, that would be bad. And in general, I don't know. What do we like? Given how crazy the turnout was in the last election, and the fact that it was so close to an even split, how many people voted for Trump? 60 million, 70 million, something like that. Like, you know, I don't know. I don't actually think all those people should die. And, you know, in fact, one of the reasons that I was so enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders' campaign for president is because I thought he had the capacity to peel off some of them and get them to vote for him instead of Trump. You know, and I don't know. I mean, I've got to, you know, I've got to say, yeah, this is pretty gross. Although I don't know, I will say it's been a little bit funny to see a lot of people who are fine with this guy 5 minutes ago expressing shock and horror about him saying this. Because if you look at what we were debating, you know, he's been all in on the war in Gaza for the last 9 months, which has, you know, like going with the direct deaths from the Ministry of Health, we're getting up to 40,000, probably a severe underestimate, given how much medical infrastructure has been destroyed in Gaza. There was the estimate in the Lancet for likely indirect deaths, which was described as a conservative estimate, which is about 186,000, given what we know about, you know, comparable conflicts and how, you know, how many people end up dying, you know, besides, you know, the people who are directly killed by bombs and bullets. So I'm not, you know, I have to say it didn't do a lot to lower my opinion, but there we go. So in any case, yeah, you all right.
I think that it's one thing if you're in the middle of a civil war or revolution already. It's one thing if it's 1939 and the tanks have rumbled their way into Poland.
Sure.
The camps are up. But and perhaps political violence in the United States, given the conditions that we're in right now, the lack of any brakes that would prevent an escalation of conflict, maybe it's just inevitable that these kinds of things will become more and more common. I think that we're all suffering a little bit of boiled frog syndrome, that things have gotten so incrementally bad, worse, step by step, year by year, day by day, that we don't notice how serious the developments are and how dire the consequences might be. But even the tenuous, uncomfortable, silent, rage-filled, sometimes loud rage-filled social peace that the United States enjoys, the truce, the ceasefire, that's not something to dispose of lightly. And there's a great deal of danger in introducing violence as a political tactic.
Yeah, especially given the extraordinary weakness of any kind of remotely left or working class aligned force that exists in the United States right now. Okay, so before we get on to the rest of this, I think that, well, maybe as a transition, I think that it's worth making two connections here. One is why you get like all of the people being like, oh, your name is Jacobin and you're telling me that like I shouldn't be happy about political assassinations. I've got to say, you know, I wrote a book a few years ago called Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, which the kind of main thesis of it was that a lot of what's wrong with the left has to do with what I call the pathologies of powerlessness, that people who've essentially given up any hope of actually changing the world, you know, settle for doing other things with politics, being the purest martyr, perhaps. And I think that being, kind of the most Jokerified nihilist is another of those manifestations of the pathologies of powerlessness. And I don't know. I think take a break. You don't have to be on Twitter every day. You can log off. You can think about things other than politics for a while, because I think if you're engaging about politics like this, you're not doing anybody any good. And if your long-term goal is to actually be useful to some sort of movement that could create a more equal society, this ain't it. But then the last thing I wanted to say with regard to the assassination, before kind of getting back to the election per se, is I think this does put a slightly different spin on, and I know Kuba, I know you have a take on this. I think that this happening does put a slightly different spin on a lot of the discussion that was happening beforehand about Project 2025 and all of that, because essentially, the kind of shape of this was the Heritage Foundation put out this wish list of what they would hope to get out of a second Trump presidency called Project 2025. It's, some of it's incoherent.
900 pages.
I certainly have not read all 900 pages, just to be really clear on this.
900 pages?
That's
more than 900 pages, yes.
Yeah.
They wrote a War and Peace for how they want to.
Yeah. It's like
it's really sad.
it's like Infinite Jest if you if you took out all of the tennis and absurdism and put in a bunch of stuff about banning abortion and purging the federal bureaucracy. But in any case, okay, just really quickly, there was a lot of discussion about this. There, one line which is not based on nothing is to say, come on, you think Donald Trump has read all 900 pages or gives a shit, right? 9 pages would be a stretch on his attention span. And in any case, once eventually people have been talking about it enough, and Trump put out a Truth Social where he was like, I don't know, this sounds dumb to me. And then, there is an actual RNC platform, which is kind of amazing because at least in the form that was initially going around, it was in all caps. And a lot of it sort of read like, I think Eric Levitz might have called it Trump's shower thoughts. So there was one that was like, avert World War III, which so far I'm on board. Bring peace to Eastern Europe and the Middle East. And build a giant missile dome over the entire United States, all made in America. That's
Still in there.
Okay, nice. So yeah, there's a lot of, so that's the official RNC platform. The other side of it was, hey, look at how many of these authors who worked in the first Trump administration or have some kind of link to Trump. So there is some reason to think this would mean something. And look, I'm sure the Heritage Foundation didn't get everything that they wanted out of Trump's first term. I'm sure they wouldn't out of the second one. But the main kind of pillar of the Project 2025 vision, as I understand it, is essentially eliminating the the deep state, in the sense of the lifetime bureaucracy, right? The civil servants who serve, regardless of which party is in power, and purging all those people and replacing them with Trump loyalists so that the deep state in the other sense could be wielded for ideological purposes. And a point that I know, as in my conversations with you, Kuba, you've made about this, is whether or not Trump would be inclined to do such a thing beforehand. Getting shot in the face does sharpen one's focus, and he might be more inclined to do it now.
I think that so I've read the RNC platform, very punchy, very easy. Like you said, Trump's shower thoughts, and the guy knows how to tweet, so it's eminently readable, which cannot be said for the Project 2025 leadership template or whatever they call it. I have read 200 of those pages. And it's a combination of different strategies, different components. The least interesting is actually their policy wish list. It's all typical stuff that you would expect from a coalition of right-wing think tanks and organizations. A bunch of deregulation, they actually double down on anti-abortion, culture war. They want to make divorce more difficult. There's all of this family stuff that is complete, and putting the two together is very telling, because all of the social conservative sex and family stuff is completely absent from the RNC document. It's just gone. But there is some very constructive overlap in what the RNC document says that the Republican Party wants and pledges Trump to do, and the other components of the Project 2025. Part of it is the typical let's deregulate, lower taxes, more the standard grab bag wish list for Republican interests. More important than that is the depth and detail of knowledge that the Project 2025 plan has about the inner bureaucratic workings of the executive branch and the operations of government more fully. They know how many positions they need to staff. They know which committees are important. They know how power is wielded in Washington to convert that 16-page policy agenda into actual action. And they're very aware of how deep you have to cut in order to destroy the sources of institutional resistance and pushback that have bedeviled previous administrations, and not just Trump's first term, but also Barack Obama. Obama famously complained about the blob, that there's this foreign policy deep state which pushed back, dragged its feet, and otherwise undermined his efforts at establishing some kind of peace deal with Iran, reworking foreign policy towards Cuba. And Obama wasn't a particularly radical figure. Indeed, culturally, sociologically, he had a great deal in common with the blob, and he was quite beloved of the Washington establishment. And yet, here there was an extensive organized network of cadres within his own government that frustrated his plans. The Heritage Foundation has been taking names. They know which positions are important. They understand that, and they quote Reagan. They attribute this quote to Reagan, although I think it may actually come from a older source, a great Marxist even, that personnel is policy. That if you get the right cadres into the right positions, then you don't really need to send out the memos to tell them exactly what to do. You are going to get your desired outcomes anyway. Trump did not understand this. He did not have a plan in his first term. That first term took everyone by surprise, him not least of all. And the level of pushback that he had, he was undermined by his own political appointees. Forget the federal civil service. Jim Mattis, the Rex Tillerson, and the list goes on. Reince Priebus, right? All of these figures that had short-lived tenures and were supposed to be the adults in the House and contain Trump, and they did. But that's also why he got rid of them and replaced them with more pliable figures. And even that, getting the people at the top that might see things your way, that is not enough, because you have incredibly boring, incredibly technical, incredibly bureaucratic processes to convert policy into 40,000 Customs and Border Patrol agents knocking on doors in every Hispanic neighborhood in America, dragging people out who don't have the right documents and sending them to Guatemala. You have to fill out a lot of paperwork to make that happen. And I don't just mean identifying the people to deport. You need budgeting. You need managers. You need personnel requisitions. You need all kinds of permitting and processes to make that a reality. Trump does not have the attention to do all that detailed work himself. So the Heritage Foundation put up its hand and it's like, we've done the work for you. This is how you do it. It remains difficult, but now there's an easy button for Trump to press. If he's willing to make a deal with these people, and they more or less want the same things as he does, and my guess is that they'll throw the social conservatives under the bus immediately. JD Vance is shut up about abortion, and the rest will fall in line. They will do all of the downstream work necessary to give Trump the security apparatus, the deep state, the civil service to make his policy a reality, right? Other political figures on the right have promised similar things, and it was always bullshit. It was always a way to throw red meat to your base, mobilize people, but you were never going to do it. Partly because you knew it was more or less impossible to get it through all of the veto gates, all of the bureaucratic obstacles that exist within the Washington apparatus. Here is a blueprint to blow up that Washington apparatus and replace it with one that can do what Trump has promised. And the Heritage Foundation is keenly aware of the previous case where it has succeeded in this mission, which was the presidency of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, he came in at a moment where the New Deal post-war order was troubled but still intact.
Mm-hmm.
You still had the Great Society, New Deal, federal bureaucracy in place. You still had that mode of doing things and those default assumptions about what government is for and how it operates working. That's what you had to push through in order to get policy done. And the Heritage Foundation provided him with his blueprint about who to fire, which positions to eliminate, which agencies to target, who to hire. One thing that the Heritage Foundation is doing as part of Project 25 is you look at the list of authors and contributors. You have figures from past administrations. You have MAGA loyalists with technical expertise and the appropriate background. They are creating the Rolodex. They're telling you who the cadres are. Not only that, but if any of you have found yourselves wishing for a new, exciting career and opportunity to serve your country, to do something that matters, well, the Heritage Foundation is taking names. They're more than happy to audition you, interview you, bring you on board if you have what it takes to fill a lower level appointment at the Department of Energy or Labor or whatever. And as long as you're willing to deport the illegals, smash wokeness, so strong, looking at you. But this is a real plan. It's something that can work, has worked in the past. And the one barrier that prevented Trump from accepting a scheme like this would be that it's still going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of entrenched interest. You're going to have to get rid of a lot of people. In his first term, one obstacle was that, and apologies to Strom, unless, you're into that kind of thing. But like anybody, if you find yourself underemployed right now, it's a tough economy. Heritage is hiring. But one obstacle that prevented Trump from doing this in his first term, apart from his ignorance about the basic operation of government, and the fact that established institutions like the Heritage Foundation really didn't know what he wanted. It was all too sudden. Was that he had Ivanka, he had Jared Kushner, he had these establishment, respectable, haute bourgeois elements that, you know, he wanted to maintain a positive relationship with. He wanted to stay on the right side of. Now that he's been abandoned by all of these moderating influences and instead embraced by national conservatives, as you know, Kanye and Nick Fuentes at the most extreme, but JD Vance is kind of median sample. And now that he's experienced one, lawfare from the Democratic Party, 34 felony convictions, and all kinds of lawsuits, criminal and civil, designed to try to derail his political career and ruin his life. And two, he's been shot at. This is no longer a question of even settling personal scores or staying out of prison for these felony convictions. At this point, it's a matter of life and death. Why didn't the Secret Service have someone stationed on that roof? Now, my guess, it's just incompetence. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no reason to assume malfeasance. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy. But Trump still got shot at. He still almost died. He's going to take that personally. He's going to want to have a Secret Service that is both willing and able to protect him. He's going to want to have a security apparatus which isn't conspiring to undermine him all the time. He has a blueprint for that now. And the Heritage is doing its best to identify the cadres that will see that through. Already, by the end of his administration, we saw some hints of what it might look like. For instance, when the National Guard and the military and the FBI were all of questionable enthusiasm when it came to enforcing Trump's preferences, especially during the Black Lives Matter protests, he began to lean on the Department of Homeland Security, especially Customs and Border Patrol, who would incidentally be the tip of the spear when it comes to deportations and a more severe regime at the border, as well as the Federal Protective Services and the U.S. Marshals. They famously were grabbing people in Portland and other protest hotspots, way beyond the typical jurisdiction of these federal agencies. By empowering those elements within the security apparatus, he gets the coercive power to impose policy by diktat without going through all the legalistic hoops and the personnel obstacles of trying to get the FBI to Pinkerton your enemies, right? And Heritage is telling him, this is how you staff up. This is how you get the budget through in order to get your favorite agencies the resources that they need. These are the figures who can get your policies and initiatives legal green light to pass. So I think that this confluence of events is very different than 2016, and that many people on the left who see either Trump as a kind of Pepsi equivalent to Genocide Joe and what he does in Gaza, who look at the 2016 term and how the world didn't end and are phlegmatic about the prospect of second Trump cadence. I think they're misreading the situation, that the pieces are in place for shift in the regime of power in the United States, not just who uses it, and perhaps not even in their goals, their stated goals is, the anti-woke agenda, the more energy extraction in the United States, deregulation, lower taxes, anti-immigration, blah, 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 which might seem like standard Republican boilerplate. But the shift in how power is executed, how power begins to feel, how people experience power, that could become much harsher because of the possibilities within the Project 2025, and these things get sticky, right? The sort of post-Cold War order is breaking down. We don't know what the future looks like. Project 2025 is one vision of it, and now we may have a president with the motivation and the means to carry it out.
Yeah,
stick around for 2 generations.
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely makes sense to me that even though I agree, almost certainly, I mean, I would really bet like 99.999% like the Secret Service that's just incompetence. Honestly, I don't even think it's that unusual. I think that I've seen stories about even specifically with that agency before. Honestly, I think it's kind of dumb luck that there aren't more successful assassinations. But I also think that even if we're right about that, and even if the person who shot Trump had not the slightest trace of any kind of left of center motivation, which actually seems, entirely possible right now from everything we know about him. I also think that Donald Trump is going to interpret this as, they tried Russiagate. They tried, prosecuting me, right? Which, and by the way, some of these were, in fact, I actually think the famous 34 felonies is in some ways is the weakest case, because I think the prosecutor wanted the headline, but also like Trump definitely did a lot of that stuff, right, that he was being prosecuted for, and I generally think it's a good thing, right, when presidents and former presidents are held to the rule of law, but that's gonna be the narrative. They tried Russiagate, they tried prosecuting me, they tried impeaching me, they tried prosecuting me, and then they shot me. And anything that looked that is interpretable as incompetence, but is also interpretable as the deep state being in on the plot, I think would give him a pretty powerful motivation to want to go along with the sort of, again, that central Project 2025 premise of doing a big purge of the permanent bureaucracy to staff up with political loyalists, and I think that could be very bad, right? And this is, I've always been a little bit of a tricky place with the intra-left debate about Trump, because so much of it is polarized between Trump is literally Hitler and Trump is fine. He's not even worse than Biden, and I don't think either of those are right. I think that the fascism analogies tend to obscure more than they clarify. That sort of classical fascism was, for one thing, a phenomenon of mass politics of a kind that doesn't really exist in the U.S. The U.S. right now. That you have what are essentially street gangs who murder a bunch of their enemies and end up getting swept into power and smashing opposition parties and trade unions and supplementing the traditional repressive machinery of the state. And I don't think that, for all sorts of reasons, I don't think that's in the cards in 2020's America. But I also think that the frustrating thing about this is that it's very easy to read what I just said as it's all going to be fine. And that's actually really, really, really not my point, right? Like, I think that things could be very bad. It's just that like new bad things could happen rather than a repetition of the bad things that we remember from, history class and World War II movies. And, I always liked the late Michael Brooks, and our friend Gene Bajalan back in 2017 co-wrote an article called where they called the GOP America's AKP. Which I always kind of liked, if only because it introduces American leftists to a second analogy for thinking about right-wing authoritarianism. And if we could go all the way to having like 4 or 5 analogies that we're all familiar with and we could use to help understand what's going on, I think that would be even better. And I think even without the sort of dramatic rupture of fascism, look, I think, democracy is a spectrum. We can pretty meaningfully talk about, like, I don't know, Hungary right now is less democratic than France is. And the United States, the United States already is starting a few notches below France, right? And I think that there are various ways in which the United States could get less democratic over time. I think it would be extremely foolish to think that that's not possible. I also think that, I don't know. I mean, just being a Republican is kind of bad enough. That, like, I mean, you remember George W. Bush, and the Patriot Act, wireless surveillance, indefinite detention, enhanced interrogation, not to mention, just basic shit like defanging the EPA, and filling the National Labor Relations Board with union busters. So I think all of that, all of which is to say, I think that there's like a lot of room in the space of not Hitler, but very bad. But I want to, in terms of the particular shape of possible very bad to come, I do want to talk about JD Vance because that's the big news from today, that he was announced as the VP pick, and this is a guy who, as I said, I've been actually writing about on and off for a while. And, even before then was kind of watching with fascination his bizarre transformations. As we all know, he is a, salt of the earth populist and an enemy of the establishment, who used to work for the Heritage Foundation, the organization we just finished talking about. So if your memory stretches back as far as 2016, he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy, which was basically all about finger-wagging hillbillies for their culture of poverty, right? He was doing the approximate equivalent of one of those black conservatives who says that the problem is the decline of the black family, and that's what causes everything. And so, of course, a lot of neoliberal Democrats loved that book. And then since then, he has sort of slowly gone from being this like never Trumper Republican. In fact, I think he once referred to Trump as America's Hitler, to being the Trumpiest Republican, and thus eventually getting rewarded with the VP slot. And in fact, just to tie the two subjects together, I saw there's this quote that's been going around today from a profile of JD Vance in 2022, where he, granted, I think for whatever reason, his strategy in that election, he was going very edgelord about a lot of things, but he comes very close to the bone of some of what Kuba was just talking about in that Vanity Fair profile. Says, I think Trump is going to run again in 2024. He says, again, this 2022. I think what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant to the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts stop you, he went on, stand before the country and say, he quoted Andrew Jackson, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. We are in a late Republican period, Vance would have said later, evoking the common new right view of America as Rome awaited Caesar. If we're going to push back against it, we're going to have to get pretty wild and pretty far out there and go in directions that a lot of conservatives right now are uncomfortable with.
We have a video too to show kind of like his energy when he first came on the scene.
Please.
If you want to, I'm gonna cue it up, but it's really crazy to see like how he used to behave. Is not really the type of guy that would say the things that he was saying in that interview, right? If anything, he was like acceptable to liberals, right, as like this kind of fellow traveler.
Exactly. He, like them, looked down on poor white people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, did you see Ron Howard? Oh, go ahead.
You write about adverse childhood consequences that some kids suffer in growing up. Being sworn at, insulted, or humiliated by your parents.
Sure. Check.
Being pushed, grabbed, or having something thrown at you.
Check.
Having parents who are separated or divorced.
Check.
Living with an alcoholic or a drug user.
Check.
Living with someone who is depressed or attempted suicide.
Check.
Watching a loved one be physically abused.
Check.
You're batting 1,000.
Yeah.
Given where he came from, JD Vance should have been a grim statistic. His parents grew up poor in rural Kentucky. His own tough childhood was in the Rust Belt ruins of Ohio. But Vance escaped what he calls his cultural inheritance, wrote a memoir about it, and landed on the bestseller list. Have you been surprised by how successful it's been?
Yes. How could I not be? Right?
Why do you
I'm
think?
sitting here talking to Megyn Kelly. This is great.
Talking to Megyn Kelly, you made it.
Yeah. Which is always funny.
Go ahead.
Too, because Megyn Kelly has also gone through a bit of a parallel transformation. I mean, there was a point where she was trying to, at one of the early debates, she was trying to kind of be the serious person to take out Trump as a moderator. Remember, he one of the early Trump classics was saying, talking about how crazy Megyn Kelly was. It's like, oh yeah, there was blood coming out of her, whatever. And since then, I think she's become an ultra Trump loyalist too, because like that's the arc of all these people.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and like Ben, you've been covering him for a while, but I mean, I think it's really striking to see him like in front of liberal audiences. His role was really like the rural white person whisperer of like why, like I think what he was kind of saying is like, I don't like Trump. I'm just, a reasonable, Yale law school graduate type guy who's smart like you, but he's really tapping into something real. And he spoke with a lot of vocal fry that he doesn't seem to have anymore. On an aesthetic sense, I think he's trying to, the beard and bolster up. But it's looking through the kind of early archives, and he has like TED Talks or TEDx Talks or whatever. It's he's really recreated himself, I think. I mean, to your point, Ben, he literally, I mean, he compared Trump to Hitler, I think, right?
I think he did at one point, which is amazing. Now he's Trump's running mate, only in America. But yeah, I mean, early JD Vance reminds me of nothing so much as there's this old Adolph Reed essay called "What Are the Drums Saying, Booker? The Curious Role of the Black Public Intellectual," where so what does it say? A typical episode of Raymar of the Jungle, an early television adventure series. The two heroes of the show spent most of their time on safari, attended by a coterie of native bearers. When they hear drums in the distance, the whites summon their head bearer. Willie, what are the drums saying? Willie, a Sancho Panza-like servant, steps forward. Buana, drums say, Simba, come soon, much danger. In these vignettes, Willie was essentially enacting the definitive role of the black public intellectual interpreting the opaquely black heart of darkness for whites. And you know, I think in some ways, right, you know, he was doing something similar as the like degenerate poor white people whisperer, you know, in the era when that clip comes from, right? You know, it's like, oh my God, tell us what it's like. Oh, wow, okay. Oh, it's so good that you came out of that and you became like us.
It's okay now.
Yeah.
It's okay. You're safe now. You're with us. You're with us.
Exactly. But then yeah, he decided to go into Republican politics. The Never Trump thing didn't work out, and so he decided to become Always Trump. And by the time he runs for Senate in Ohio in 2022, he is probably one of the prominent Republican politicians who is leaning the hardest rhetorically into the populist rebrand. And I know, you know, people who have, you know, a vastly more charitable read on JD Vance than I do. And I'm thinking here of, like, I don't know, like the kind of people who on other issues I might think, you know, have something worth saying, but I think are I don't know, I'm trying to come up with a nicer word than Mark, but you know, but I think are a bit too accepting of his branding on this. Talking to you, Zaid, they have will bring up stuff like, oh, after East Palestine, you know, he did some rail safety stuff. I will just say, I know the guys at the Valley Labor Report have done multiple episodes breaking down the details of that, and I think that what's in the the what's in the tin does not match the packaging on the rail safety question. And in general, I mean, it's just kind of astonishing. So in 2022, when he was running for Senate, he basically early on, he did, like, eventually in the general election phase, like, he got other big donors, but for much of that election, certainly while the Republican primaries were going on, he was running pretty much entirely on the largesse of a single donor, which was his fellow, you know, salt of the earth, populist tribune of the Forgotten Hillbillies, Peter Thiel. And in fact, the way that it pretty much worked is, since there are legal limits for how much one guy is allowed to contribute to a campaign, but there is not a legal limit to how much you can spend on your own super PAC that doesn't officially coordinate with the campaign. Thank you, Supreme Court. And that was the Citizens United decision. And so to get around this, this sounds like a joke, but this is literally what they did. Said, all right, the official JD Vance campaign had almost no money because almost all the spending was being done by Peter Thiel's pro-Vance super PAC, which wasn't legally allowed to coordinate. So if they'd sent, like, emails back and forth coordinating strategy, that would have been against the law. So what they did is a lot of the research that would normally be done with in-house in a campaign was done within the Thiel super PAC on behalf of the campaign. And then, of course, they had to have some way of, like, getting their findings to the official campaign, but they couldn't, as I said, just exchange a bunch of emails, because then that would be too obvious they were breaking the law. So the super PAC created this website that was designed to sort of not be obvious and sort of come up in Google searches, which was nothing but a link to a public Google Drive folder that had all their research in it. So, you know, you write down the URL on one bar napkin one time, right? And you never need to send a single email. And around the time the primary was over, the press had gotten wind of this. So they found this, like, 100 and some page document that the Teal super PAC had put together of all of Vance's vulnerabilities, which made for fascinating reading. Like that was what I was using as the source for that Daily Beast article that I wrote in 2022. They sure did find a lot of interest in vulnerabilities. For example, he, like a lot of his website made a big deal about the opioid crisis. Didn't really say what he was going to do about it specifically, but
He was going to disapprove visibly.
Yes.
Furrow his brow, look very concerned, and then judge you.
Brave stance to come out against anti-opioid addiction and against anti-opioid addicts as well, I think.
Yeah, well, ultimately, he's just going to blame the Mexicans anyway.
Yeah. What he said on his 2022 campaign website was, "I will work to tackle the drug epidemic, eliminate the drugs coming into our community, and help those devastated by addiction." So there you go. I don't know what more you want to know. He had in fact, he had started a nonprofit that was supposed. It said it was an anti-opioid nonprofit that briefly existed and apparently spent more than 95% of its 2017 fundraising on staff salaries and overhead, and $0 on charitable activities or grants. So that was one of the weaknesses that was pointed out there. He also has a fairly impressive talent for rebranding the positions of the Wall Street Journal editorial board as edgy populism. So, for example, Jake, do we have the clip of JD Vance talking about Medicare for all?
Yeah, this is it's him talking to Tucker, and basically just for context, it's he's talking to Tucker about how there's this paradigm shift away from Democrats being the party of the working class, and now it's going to be Republicans, and there are some issues in which it might seem like Democrats are trying to become a little bit more popular. Some Democrats are trying to be more populist, but he knows better. But yeah, here's the clip.
I think Democratic leaders kind of get this. If you look at the big proposals from the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates, universal child care, debt-free college, even Medicare for all, which is framed as this lurch to the left, but is really just a big handout to doctors, physicians, pharmaceutical companies, and hospitals, they sort of get that they're the party of the professional class, and a lot of their policies are geared towards making life easier for professional class Americans. The problem I have is that my party, the Republican Party, hasn't quite figured out that we basically inherited a big chunk of the old FDR coalition. The middle of the country, working and middle class, blue collar folks, the sort of people who work, pay their taxes, send their kids to the military. That's increasingly the base of the Republican Party, but the Republican donor elites are actually not aligned with those folks in a lot of ways. And so there's this really big mismatch, big picture within the Republican Party.
Yeah. Medicare for all is a giveaway to doctors, which, by the way, I think would be news to most physicians associations who don't like it because making less money.
JD Vance has actually come up with the brilliant alchemy of finding a way to present a version of populism which totally works for Peter Thiel. Right? That's not an easy thing to do, and that's why he gets to be VP. Right? It's an achievement, and it's one, frankly, that should terrify all of us, because that's how you get 20 more years of this type of governance institutionalized. You cement that coalition.
Yeah, I mean, he also has from the same, from a little bit I guess after the clip before the before he went into the Senate. So this is 2021. He says universal child care is a massive substitute to the lifestyle preferences of the affluent over the preferences of the middle and working class. Because he shows a poll where where there's people with less than 4 years of college, less than a 4-year college degree, 44 to 35% favor one parent works full time, one parent provides childcare at home. There's a sort of half a gesture to sure cash payments would be okay. But then he says universal daycare is class war against normal people, which is also, because if you, you're definitely helping ordinary people by making them shell out for daycare to private companies, and it's also just kind of I will also just repeat what I say every time this subject comes up, which is like it's so bizarrely utopian for people like JD Vance to claim to support the single breadwinner model, because look, my own view on this is there shouldn't be any gendered pressure on anybody to stay home with kids, of course, but if a couple decides that what they want is for one of them to stay home, for some period of their lives to take care of the kids, I think that's absolutely something a decent society would enable as an option for them. But
I prefer the model where AI procedurally sequences the genomes of clones that are raised in incubating vats, decanted and collectively raised in Antifa communes to prepare them for their roles as administrators and super soldiers. But teach their own.
On day one, we're doing Gattaca. That's day one, and then we'll move from there, because that's not far enough.
Yeah, no, some real appealing visions of the future.
It's in the third volume of Das Kapital, I believe.
yeah, that's right. Definitely rally a strong majority of society to support that. But yeah, look, I think if people want to stay, home with kids, absolutely, that should, that's something decent society would enable. But what the fuck is the plan for economically enabling that Peter Thiel is going to get on board with? Right? It's seriously, what are you going to do to restore the family wage that was a product of, okay, granted also, carpet bombing the industrial base of some of America's major competitors, which is really good for manufacturing markets after World War II, but also was a product of industrial unions, right? The activities of the CIO in the 30s is really what created a lot of those jobs, where people who'd only been to high school could get a job that they could support an entire family on. Well, there's nothing that JD Vance supports that would make that possible. Again, the man doesn't even
disagree. I think that there is an element of magical thinking in the Republican economic plan, although about as much as in the Democratic Republican plan, the Democratic economic plan. But one, there's the idea that the oil and gas sector, things like fracking, pipelines, etc., will produce an abundant. It's not going to, but it will produce some. The bigger jobs program for the single breadwinner model is, of course, Customs and Border Patrol, Federal Protective Services, the network of detention centers you're going to need to process and house all of the people that you're deporting, then process and house all of the people that you're arresting for opposing the mass deportations. That's going to create a lot of jobs, right? There's no jobs program quite like militarization. And if you are targeting segments of your own population, you don't even have to fight an enemy.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, all right, criticism withdrawn. I now understand the plan for creating all these millions of good jobs. But
plus, because they involve a great deal of violence and physical labor, they're going to be gendered, right? Like, they're going win.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. There is a deeper coherence to all of this that I was missing.
Just because it's evil doesn't mean it won't work.
But last item, I will say, once while arguing about this stuff with a friend of me of the show, Sora Bamari, I pointed out that none of these allegedly populist Republican senators were willing to get on board with the PRO Act, which would sort of reverse some of the worst provisions of Taft-Hartley that make it hard to organize unions in American workplaces. And he said, oh, well, Vance has said that he doesn't want to do that because it would reinforce the basic Wagner Act framework, which is bad for, blah, 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 blah. There was like, it seemed like there too, again, the man has spent a lot of time thinking about how to pitch voting in a way that's ultimately going to keep the teal checks coming, how to square the circle between that and the, and the claim to care a great deal about the American working class. So I suppose he is the perfect running mate for everybody's favorite anti-establishment billionaire who was president for 4 years, and which, by the way, I will note a lot of people seem to have memory hold the Trump presidency and sort of take all the populist rhetoric on board as if they were hearing it for the first time in 2016. And, I will just note, and by the way, I know a lot of people process any discussion of politics, especially electoral politics, as like electioneering and like, and want to know like who I'm voting for and blah, blah, blah. I'm registered to vote in California. It literally could not possibly matter less who I vote for. I don't know. I have a, if one of you guys buys me a drink, I might write in your name, on the ballot this November. It does not fucking matter. I do. I also, the last thing that I want to do with my time is scold anybody who's too angry about genocide to vote for Joe Biden. I think that's the most understandable thing in the world. I also think it's understandable if you live in a swing state and you want to make a harm reduction calculation. I did that when I was living in a swing state in 2020. That's not what this is, right? This is political analysis, right? Like, I'm under no illusion that I have the slightest power to like exercise an influence on the outcome of the election. I mean, if niche left-wing podcasts were in a position to do that, we'd be living in a very different world. But we're not. And I approach all this stuff in the spirit of, I remember last time I was in the UK, my British brother-in-law asked, like, I had like a conversation with him about American politics, or about 5 minutes in, he asked me, I'm not going to try to do the accent. So what are you going to do? Are you going to start a revolution? I said, what? Me? Jesus, no. If somebody else does, I'll totally write an article for Jacobin with my take about how the revolution is good. Right? But like, that's what I'm doing here.
On that note, one other thing to take it back to where we started about tweeting one's enthusiasm for assassination attempts against people we don't like. Don't forget that everyone's taking this very seriously. It is a very serious development. Your tweets are getting read in Langley. Your online chatter is being added to a file, probably by AI in the first cut because it's cheaper and kind of like flashy. But, you know, now that somebody has shot at Trump, all of your edgelord humor about the things that you would like to do are going to be treated very differently by the Secret Service and associated agencies. I was actually going to write a comment that I'll take Ben up on the offer of writing my name in for a drink, except then he'd be arrested for putting a politically subversive alien's name on a U.S. presidential ballot. That seems like some election fraud, you know, or should be. And then I realized that wasn't a joke. That's a concern. I don't know most of you in the chat. I don't know you personally, but like, we have to think about one another under these conditions in these times. Be safe. You have to look after yourselves because the baleful eye of the state is going to be looking in every direction now. And it's bad enough when it's the Bidenist, woke, kind of incompetent Secret Service, but if they Project 2025, the security agencies.
Yeah,
Plato's shrimp. That looks safe. Just do that.
Yeah,
just do that.
I was one thing I wanted to say about some of the people who have fallen for the JD Vance type populism, specifically the people who, you know, would say like they don't really trust liberals or Democrats or see them as controlled opposition. Fair enough. But if you want to talk about like controlled opposition, I feel like you can't really get much more on target than these fucking phony right-wing populists, you know what I mean, of trying to like sap up any sort of populist, the populist / popular discontent that exists and funnel it into a Heritage Foundation candidate. I mean, to me, that is like almost the literal, it's a pretty, I don't know about textbook, but close to textbook definition of that. So, you know, be skeptical of liberals all you want, but then to support someone like Vance, I think it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you should be skeptical of liberals.
I do support that. Yeah,
yes,
to be clear,
I am all in favor of skepticism about liberals, and you know, going back to the point about niche left-wing podcasts sadly not being in a position to dictate the outcomes of American elections. You know, people, you know, say, oh well, you know, you should be like supporting, you know, a third party breaking with the Democrats. Like, look, if I thought there was something this show could do that would will into existence an American Workers' Party that was independent and, you know, could and could win elections, I promise you I would be doing it. I really, you know, nobody's told me the combination of keys that I'm supposed to hit on StreamYard to make that happen. But like, if you know it, let me know. Right. And, you know, better yet, if, you know, if there's one where we could skip all that, and I don't know why we're bothering with electoral politics anyway, while we're just wish casting and just, you know, do away with the capitalist state and, you know, and directly skip to instituting a better mode of production, then, you know, then I mean, as long as it's not like a really long string of keys that I have to press, I will absolutely do it. But in any case, that's, and yeah, I think that, you know, I think that when there are useful real world developments, it's the role of left media to try to make itself useful to them. I think that belief that left media can sort of summon useful real world developments into being is misplaced, and it's the source of a lot of clownishness that you see on social media and real media, and whatever that thing is in between the two, where you yell into cameras on YouTube. But I do want to wrap up here and get and just get some while we're just taking an acid bath of bleakness here about the last few days, just predictions from the people on screen right now. Like, do you think that there's a scenario where Trump doesn't win at this point? And if he does win, how bad do you think that would be? Jay Andrew, you want to start?
I'm kind of hoping for an October surprise of like what happened on July 4th in the 1800s when John Adams and was it not Madison, the one of the former presidents there, they both died on the same day. I'm kind of hoping that that's the October surprise. Biden and Trump both drop dead, and we have to scramble for some new people to be putting on top of the ticket.
Your lips to God's ears, Jake.
I think it's unlikely. I haven't looked at the polls recently, but I think it's unlikely but possible that Biden wins. Just in the sense that, like, I remember a lot of people were shitting on some of the pollsters when Hillary lost because they gave her, like, I think some pollsters gave her like maybe like 4 out of 5 chance to win. Just because Trump won doesn't mean that was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, unlikely things do happen.
Totally.
So if he, if Biden has a 20% chance to win, who knows what's going to happen in the week before. If Trump wins, it's I think as we've discussed before, it's more of an ongoing trend of what you're mentioning, of the undermining of democracy. Is I think it just he doesn't represent it alone, but it's very alarming, and especially with like an assassination attempt behind him. I mean, hey, we can't, I don't know the procedures of how you would say, hey, we're not going to have an election right now. But I mean, I feel like in terms of suspending normal democratic processes, having an assassination attempt behind you is not a good it's not a good thing, right? It's not a good it's not going to make him lean on his best impulses if he ever had any. So I'm very, very, very concerned, I would say, but I don't have anything super specific. Kuba's going to tell us exactly what's going to happen. Unlike me, he's going to be
nice.
brave.
Well, I think that there is a way to beat Trump at this point, and that is the late August, early September replacement of Biden-Harris with The Rock and Bill Burr as a outsider ticket. Bring them into the Democratic Party, as a kind of draft Hollywood to save our asses situation. The Rock agrees because he figures it's a great opportunity. He's got a movie coming out anyway, right? Like the Fast and the Furious franchise is going to have a reboot, right? It's great synergy. And Bill Burr was paying attention when Dick Cheney was vice president, so he agrees to that spot. Yeah, like if you could bring in outsiders that have their own positives to replace Biden-Harris on the Democratic ticket, if you could bring some celebrities that have enough regular guy appeal to lower the temperature like Biden wanted and create that contrast with the Republican ticket, then that's a path to victory that the Democrats have available, even at this late stage. They're not going to do it. They won't, because the entire party exists to monopolize power for its incumbents. It exists to serve Biden, not to win elections. And when I say Biden, I mean Biden types. I think that Trump is going to win, and that it will be like the Reagan presidency. There will be a thoroughgoing purge of the civil service, and there will be an institutional reconfiguration of the way in which power is affected, as well as the cadres that affect it. And it will be consequential. There will be a very different and much less hospitable domestic order as a result for everyone on this screen and everyone without a US passport, as well as all kinds of other people that don't fit within the Republican coalition, which will unapologetically pursue a chauvinist agenda. I think that a Trump election bodes well for resolution of the Ukraine war, because he bodes ill for NATO, and he is someone that Putin feels like he can deal with. A Trump presidency is terrible for the situation in the Middle East, which will progress and probably escalate. There might be a war with Iran. And ultimately, the big question is when the other shoe will drop in the Pacific. That has the most severe consequences, and ultimately the future of the world will probably be written by the PRC. So, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that, you know, I mean, just to start out with the most important part, I don't think GTAA is going to be banned in the second Trump term. I think we're okay. I think that I think that I think that there are various ways in which the U.S. state apparatus could get more authoritarian. I wouldn't rule that out at all, but I think it's, you know, I do think it's incremental. Again, if you're hearing that as everything's fine, then, you know, play it back, you know, because that's definitely not what I said.
But you think he would leave after because if he can't run again, I mean, he's gonna be old as fuck too. But you think he would? You think because he had a narrative for the election was stolen, but there would be no narrative that makes any sense with I need to serve a third term, right?
No, JD Vance just needs to start kissing ass in like 2026, and the whole time be your legacy. I don't know how I can possibly live up to everything that you've done for the United States, Mr. President. Oh my God, it's like trying to follow in the footsteps of somebody who has the divine grace of Jesus, but also the raw machismo of Burt Lancaster, plus your hair just looks so much better than mine.
The musicality of Phantom of the Opera apparently would get him going.
That
Sorry,
would also help. Yeah. No,
yeah.
The Trump doesn't like politics. He doesn't like any of this. One reason why he's so crazy is that he's been sucked into this world that he never wanted to inhabit. And he's doing all of this to prove the point that he's not a loser. And if you just give him that glorious sunset, right, where thank you, sir, thank you for all you've done, so much give him the gratitude that Ivanka and Kushner have spurned, right, in his twilight years, then yeah, he'll dodder off and play golf, right? Like, and brag about how amazing he was and all the women he banged, right? It's not a problem. The problem is if he thinks that like somebody's laughing at him, he's constantly telling on himself when he projects and says that all of these other countries, they're laughing at us. All of the other countries, they don't respect us, right? They don't say thank you for all that we've done. He's just another boomer complaining about his grandchildren.
Yeah, that much definitely does sound right to me. But I don't know. I guess I think that if you think that Trump is more more vengeful about his use of the security state this time, which there is some reason to think the man did just get shot in the face, then that seems not good to me. But if you think that he's just going to govern like he did the first time, which is to say tax cuts for rich people, orgy of deregulation, stuffing the National Labor Relations Board with hardcore union busters, like I remember reading an article in the New York Times in December 2020 about how some Trump administration officials were taking his last weeks in office to do a last-minute push to weaken safety regulations for long-haul truckers. We could get that again. Essentially, tell the EPA to fuck off for a few years as far as poisoning the
best case scenario.
Yes, exactly. Fun best case scenario for everybody. And I do suspect that that's what's going to happen, because whereas niche left-wing podcasts aren't in a position to dictate the election, somebody who we haven't really talked about much tonight, but who is in a position to have a big influence on what happens in the election is Joseph Robinette Biden, who has assembled all of his wisest counselors. For example, his son Hunter, who's been specifically named, New York Times reporting as having been present at some of the meetings with top-level aides to decide whether he should stay in the race, and has decided that he should stick it out, that he should just do as good his job. And that's a quote. And that's all that's ultimately going to matter, whether he tried his very best. And so, again, sir, if you're watching, I assume you are, I mean, I would have to respectfully disagree with Hunter and say that maybe you shouldn't run again. But since he's decided that he's going to, I suspect that Trump is going to win. And the best case scenario is not really that much fun. But I don't know. I guess as we wrap up, let's so I know Jake and Andy, do you want to do like a 20-minute break and then do a short post game tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we will do that up to our deep state friend, whether he feels like joining or not. But either way, we will do that. And if you're a patron, you don't have the link yet, actually, because I fucked up, but you will soon. And my last thought for the night is I've tried spacebar shift 3 asterisk. That didn't work. But if somebody can give me the key combination to get the Democrats to nominate The Rock and Bill Burr, I'm actually much less excited about The Rock, but I love Bill Burr. So, if that happens, then I'm sorry, plate of shrimp. You just lost my vote. But that's on that note, we're going to end the main show for tonight. Left is best.